The warm morning sunlight spilled across the quiet streets as office workers hurried toward another busy day. Outside a luxury hotel, a young woman in an elegant business suit stumbled down the front steps, clearly disoriented after a company celebration that had lasted until dawn. Luxury cars drove past without stopping. Business associates who had applauded her only hours earlier quietly looked away. Just as she nearly collapsed onto the sidewalk, a humble single father carrying groceries for his little son rushed forward and caught her before she fell. While helping her into his old pickup truck, he had no idea she was one of the country's youngest CEOs. She had no idea that the kind stranger holding her steady had once been married to the daughter of the woman waiting anxiously for her at home. Within 24 hours, both of their lives would uncover a family secret buried by grief for nearly a decade. If you believe kindness and second chances can heal even the deepest wounds, please like this video, share it with someone who believes in compassion, leave a heartfelt comment, and subscribe to Kindness Paradise for more emotional stories that inspire hope. The single father was named Mason Carter. 5 years earlier, he had lost his beloved wife, Olivia, during complications shortly after the birth of their son, Noah. Olivia had grown up believing she was an orphan after being separated from her family as a child through a tragic legal mistake following a devastating natural disaster. Despite years of searching together, Mason and Olivia never succeeded in finding her relatives before she passed away. After her death, Mason dedicated every part of his life to raising Noah with the kindness, honesty, and compassion Olivia had always shown everyone around her. The young CEO was Victoria Langley, the newly appointed leader of Langley Biotech. Brilliant and hard-working, she had spent years proving herself inside one of the country's largest medical companies. The previous evening, investors had celebrated the company's record-breaking success. Victoria rarely drank alcohol, but endless toasts and overwhelming pressure had left her exhausted and unable to think clearly. Embarrassed by her condition, she refused to call her employees for help, determined to avoid becoming tomorrow's gossip. Mason carefully helped Victoria into his truck while Noah handed her a bottle of water from the back seat. Rather than asking questions, Mason simply drove toward the address Victoria quietly managed to remember. Along the way she repeatedly apologized for causing trouble. Mason smiled gently and reminded her that everyone deserves help on their worst day. When they finally arrived at an elegant countryside home, the front door opened before Mason could even knock. An older woman rushed outside with tears streaming down her face. She embraced Victoria tightly before repeatedly thanking Mason for bringing her daughter home safely. Her name was Margaret Langley. As Margaret looked at Mason more carefully, her eyes suddenly stopped on a small silver necklace hanging around his neck. It carried Olivia's wedding ring. Margaret politely asked if the ring had belonged to his wife. Mason nodded. He quietly explained that Olivia had passed away several years earlier. The color immediately disappeared from Margaret's face. With trembling hands, she reached into her pocket and removed an old photograph she had carried for decades. The smiling young girl in the picture wore the exact same necklace. Margaret could barely breathe. She whispered one heartbreaking sentence. "I've been searching for my daughter for 30 years. Mason froze. Because the woman standing before him had just claimed to be Olivia's mother. Morning sunlight filled the Langley family home, but no one inside noticed its warmth. Margaret Langley stood frozen, her hands trembling as she held the faded photograph beside Olivia's wedding ring. Tears streamed down her face as she explained that 3 decades earlier, during a devastating flood, her little daughter had been separated from the family. A series of legal mistakes, lost records, and failed adoptions had left everyone believing the child could never be found. For years Margaret searched hospitals, orphanages, and government offices, refusing to give up hope. But time slowly stole every lead. Mason could barely speak. He carefully removed another small keepsake from his wallet. It was a childhood drawing Olivia had carried her entire life. In one corner was the same tiny flower symbol that appeared on the back of Margaret's old family photograph. Margaret broke into tears. There was no longer any doubt. Olivia had truly been her missing daughter. Victoria stood silently watching everything unfold. Only hours earlier she had believed the kind stranger was simply helping a person in need. Now she realized that Mason and little Noah were not strangers at all. They were family. She slowly knelt in front of Noah and gently asked if she could give him a hug. The little boy looked toward his father. Mason smiled softly and nodded. Noah wrapped his tiny arms around Victoria, completely unaware that he had just embraced the aunt he never knew existed. The house filled with tears. Not tears of sorrow alone, but tears for all the years they had unknowingly lost. Margaret spent the afternoon showing Mason old family albums. Together they compared photographs, letters, and memories until every missing piece finally fit together. Olivia had grown up believing she had no family, while her mother had spent decades praying that one day her daughter would return home. Although Olivia was gone, a part of her had found its way back. That evening, Victoria quietly confessed something that had weighed heavily on her heart for years. Despite becoming a successful CEO, she often felt completely alone. She had buried herself in work after watching her mother grieve every birthday, every holiday, and every Christmas without her missing daughter. Success had filled her calendar, but it had never healed the emptiness inside her family. Looking at Noah playing happily in the garden, Margaret whispered that Olivia's smile had returned. Not in photographs, but in her grandson. Mason promised that Noah would always know the truth about his mother and the family who had never stopped loving her. For the first time since Olivia's passing, he no longer felt like he was carrying her memories alone. However, as everyone gathered for dinner that evening, the family attorney arrived carrying a sealed envelope. It had been written by Olivia years before her death, and no one had ever opened it. Inside was a final letter that would leave every person in the room in tears. The golden morning sunlight streamed into the Langley family home as everyone gathered quietly around the dining table. The atmosphere was filled with emotion as the family attorney carefully opened the sealed envelope that had remained untouched for years. Olivia had written the letter shortly after Noah was born, asking that it only be opened if her family was ever found. Mason gently held Noah on his lap while Margaret and Victoria struggled to steady their trembling hands. The attorney slowly began to read. Olivia wrote that although she had grown up believing she had no parents, she never stopped hoping that somewhere, someone still remembered her. She explained that if her family ever received the letter, she wanted them to know she had never blamed them for losing her. She believed that love does not disappear simply because people become separated. It waits patiently until hearts find one another again. Margaret could no longer hold back her tears. She whispered her daughter's name over and over, wishing she had one more chance to hold her. The letter continued. Olivia thanked Mason for giving her a life filled with love and happiness despite the sadness she carried. She wrote that if she were no longer alive when the letter was read, she wanted Noah to grow up surrounded by every person who loved him, because family is not measured by the years spent together but by the love shared when life offers another chance. Even the attorney wiped away tears. The room remained silent. No one could find words powerful enough to answer the message Olivia had left behind. Over the following months, everything slowly changed. Margaret became the grandmother Noah had never known. Every weekend she taught him the family recipes Olivia had loved as a little girl before they were separated. Victoria, despite her demanding career as CEO, made time to attend Noah's school events, soccer matches, and birthdays. For the first time in many years, the Langley home echoed with laughter instead of grief. Mason also found peace. The loneliness he had carried since losing Olivia became lighter because he no longer felt that he was protecting her memory by himself. Every photograph, every story, and every smile could now be shared with the family Olivia had dreamed of finding. Inspired by the extraordinary reunion, Victoria launched the Olivia Hope Foundation, dedicated to helping reunite families separated by disasters, administrative errors, and missing child cases. The organization provided legal assistance, counseling, and search resources for families who had nearly lost hope. Thousands of families eventually found one another because of the foundation. Each successful reunion reminded Margaret that even though her daughter could never return, Olivia's kindness continued changing lives through those she loved most. Years later, Noah stood beside a large portrait of his mother during the opening of the foundation's national headquarters. Looking proudly at his grandmother, his aunt, and his father, he smiled and said that although he had never been able to grow up with his mother, she had somehow brought everyone together anyway. Those simple words filled every heart with hope. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who believes family can find its way back together. leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Kindness Paradise for more emotional stories about love, hope, and second chances. Special request. Comment. Love always finds its way home. As the warm afternoon sunlight illuminated the garden outside the Langley home, Noah laughed while running between his father, grandmother, and aunt. Olivia was no longer there to hold his hand. But because one humble single father chose kindness on an ordinary morning, a broken family was finally made whole again. Sometimes, the greatest miracle is not finding wealth or success. It is finding the people who never stopped loving you.